right. Evening, everyone. Excellent. Glad to see everyone back. All right. Okay, so for those of you who are just joining us, we are continuing in the character unit of the intermediate series of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, and this is the teacher's certification course. And I'm glad that everyone made it back. It's glad to see your faces. It's a joy to see people who are actually taking the time out of their lives to work to make society a better place. This can't be done by just one person. No man's an island, as it said. It takes a community, a group of people to have a goal in their mind, a positive goal in this case, and to collaborate and work together, basing it off of these moral principles that we're covering and have been covering from the beginning of this course here, and sticking with it diligently until the desired outcome is achieved. And of course, this takes a long time. It takes a period of time, like one of the teachers said before. I mean, our society did not get to the state that it's in overnight, and of course, we can't realistically expect it to be fixed overnight. Sadly, everything that we have now has our minds trained to want everything instantly, right? You can instantly make a phone call. You have to wait. If you have to wait 3 or 4 seconds for a page to load on your phone, you think it's taking forever. Just 20 years ago, we didn't have websites that we had to look at. So we kind of have to retrain our minds and retrain our way of thinking in regards to the peaceful solution and its application to understand. Especially when we get into goal setting, we'll see that, we have to set realistic goals. I have a goal and understanding our purpose, but understand that things aren't going to occur instantly. And it's the journey of 1,000 miles, as it said, it begins with the first step, and it's one step at a time. And, and these are baby steps. Most of us, we've been following along with the peaceful solution for a period of time now, and so these things are a lot more familiar to us than somebody who has never heard of the concepts of self-control or self-respect, or they might have heard the word, but they didn't really know what it meant. Okay, and so for them it's baby steps. And if you've ever watched a baby growing up, those of us who have ever been around children or have had children ourselves, it's an interesting thing to watch them when they start to get to the point where they're trying to stand up, right? They're going from crawling when they have to learn to crawl, right? You have to learn to crawl, they say, before you walk, unless you're one of those miracle babies that start walking right away, and then sometimes they revert to crawling, but they regress. But it's interesting to watch them go through the progress of learning to crawl. Okay, first they fall on their face, and then they push their legs, and their torso's not moving, but they're trying to develop this movement so they can get from one place to another. And nobody really teaches a baby how to crawl. It's just something that's within them. They don't see too much. Sometimes the parent gets down there and tries to crawl with them, but it's inert. It's in them to learn, to develop, to move, and to crawl. And that's something within at least the human species to grow and to develop and to move forward. We should always have the desire within ourselves to improve, to constantly improve. Now, as we're learning from the peaceful solution, one of the ways that, or the main way that we can want to improve is we have to educate ourselves, right? We have to educate ourselves, and we have to know that there is room for improvement within each and every one of us. And if we think that we're perfect, we're not going to want to make any improvements. But we do have to have a healthy concept, and we're not going to focus on that word, but it's important because you'll hear that phrase throughout the program here. A concept, a healthy concept. We have to have a healthy concept about ourselves, the way we see ourselves, and the responses that other people give to us, which kind of formulates how other people see us, and then how we think about ourselves as a result of how other people see us. And we're going to talk about that today in dealing with the effects of character within a family, because a child can develop a concept about themselves based on the input that comes from their parents or guardians. Okay, and that concept can be a healthy one. if the parent or guardian is building them up, if they're teaching them and training them in ways that will help them to develop a positive moral character. Or it can be an unhealthy one if there is a lack of training in that, or a parent or guardian is constantly putting the child down. And some of us have probably experienced those things or seen it taking place if we've had friends or associates or people that we grew up with who lived in a home where the parents were abusive. They were verbally abusive. And it's so much easier to be abusive with your mouth than it is with your hands because the scars aren't always visible on the outside, right? It's easy to open your mouth and call somebody a derogatory name or to say something that puts somebody down and just turn and walk away and not have to worry about anybody seeing the effects of what you did to that person. But as we're going to see here, these words, the words that we say to people, they're very, very important. I mean, when you think about the peaceful solution, it wouldn't be made known to us if the words that are in the book was not taught to us, right? And so words are extremely important, and how those words are used and how they're presented to other people, especially a child when they're in their what they call formative years, when they're very impressionable. I think the psychologists say that their minds are plastic. In other words, it's very moldable, and that's what we're doing. We're molding the character of ourselves and others by our actions, by our words, our behavior, and our attitude. Remember the categories of morality. And so it's very important that we pay attention to ourselves. And remember, like the previous teacher said, in regards to what we're learning, because we're all learning to be teachers. This is a teacher's certification course. You don't know, we can't always assume that our students are going to be in the age of 12 to 13 or 5 to 10 or whatever. Your students might be the age of 50 to 60 or 30 to 40. A student is a student. We're all students here, right? And so have your mind set on these concepts and getting these things over to people in a way that of course is understandable, what they can relate to. This is why we break the words down and give definitions. We're not thinking that anybody's ignorant of these things, but we want to make sure that you understand what the words that are presented in the peaceful solution so that you can better be able to relate it to your students. Because if after they walk away from the class, they haven't gained anything, then we haven't done them any justice as a teacher. So we want to make sure that they're understanding these concepts as we move forward here. So like I said here, we are in the second chapter of the character unit here, and it's the effects of character within a family. And the last teacher left off on page 38, and just to go back to LP2D, just to refresh our memory with the second part of the procedure, which he was in procedure 4 here. Let's just go back and read that second paragraph. That's LP2D. All right. And it says, have students turn to pages 38 through 41 in their handbooks and read the section entitled, When There Are Problems at Home. Read and discuss the narratives about Ricky and Shantae's experience, which comes a little bit after that. That's found on page 43, and how these affected their character. Allow time for students to answer the questions that follow the stories. And of course, that gives you feedback in seeing where their minds are, because remember, even though we're talking about the effects of character within the family in this chapter, it's building off of the previous chapter. So we're not just looking for them to bring forth the concepts or the lessons of what they've only learned in chapter 2. We're looking also for pieces of information that they've grasped off of chapter 1 as well. Okay, it's very important to make sure that they're remembering all these things. And I mean, you might think it's a lot to remember, but the way these lessons are designed, they go back and they rehearse. They go back and draw in points and tie everything together from the previous chapters, from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 7, so it stays fresh in the student's mind. So he finished off with that first paragraph there, when there are problems at home. And I'd like to just back up and just reread that again as we move forward to the next section here. Let's look to the mental, not the mental, the middle part of that paragraph where it says an adult's experiences. And it says an adult's experiences, values, and character define what kind of parent he or she will be, right? And that's what we learned in the very first chapter, right? Our experiences and our values, these are the types of things that will help to form our character. And of course, once that character is formed, and remember, it's not fixed, it's not stuck. You've had experiences, values, environment, certain things within your genetics, choices that you've made, and now you're 35 years old, and you're going to have a child. You're going to start a family. Well, they say it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but it's not impossible, right? It might be difficult to make changes, and remember what we covered in the first chapter. This is the road less traveled. Yes, would it have been easier if we would have had these concepts taught to us when we were very young? If our parents would have been taught these things when they were very young, so they could have been passed on to us through genetic and experiences and things that they value and things that they really appreciate and hold important to them? Yeah, that would have been great. But in all reality, that's not the case for probably 99% of us. So we have to start with what we have. Okay, we have to take the piece of material that has been given to us and then start to shape and mold it. And look at the character education program. This character education program as the tools that will help shape and mold, like a blacksmith. He has certain tools, and he just has a piece of ore, a piece of iron or copper or tin or whatever it is that he's going to use. That's a tinsmith or a coppersmith, so I'm just using that term generally. And he has a piece of metal, and he might have to refine that metal to get the purity of that metal out by putting it through the fire. And then once he has a suitable piece of metal, then he can start to heat it and soften it and beat it and shape it and mold it to develop into the shape that he wants to have. Well, this character education are those tools that will help to heat and beat and mold us to going out in society. That's kind of, they say, man, they really put me to the fire with that one. Right? Going out into society or having these trials where we have to put these lessons into effect, that's like being put through the fire, right? Not in a bad way or bad sense, but that is there to strengthen you. That's there to show you where you have strengths and weaknesses in your character and where you need to make improvements. But that's why we have to continuously go back to the book here, right? Go back and reread the information. If you have a problem or if something comes up, if a student brings forth something that presents a question to you, it's not necessary for you to remember every single word in the book. It's great if you can, but part of it is just knowing where to go to find it, okay? And so as a teacher, you just have to keep these things in mind. It's like an encyclopedia. Right? Well, some of our young people don't remember encyclopedias, but a lot of us who are older, we had encyclopedias, and there was the encyclopedia salesman that came and, door to door and sold you Encyclopedia Britannica or Americana or whatever, New World and so forth, and you had them from A to Z. And if you wanted to learn something about gorillas or honey or galaxies, you went to that corresponding letter and opened up that encyclopedia. You didn't have to memorize the information. You just had to know where to look so you can educate yourself. And this is what we have with the Peaceful Solution. So it says, although these experiences, values, and character define what kind of parent, an adult's experiences, values, and character define what kind of parent he or she will be. And although most parents treat their children with love and respect and provide them with food, food, and shelter, there are some parents, because of their upbringing and choices, who are verbally, emotionally, physically, and even sexually abusive to their children. In these homes, parents are often negligent. They're often negligent, and we had that definition that was given to us here. In fact, in the back of your book there, on page 170, in the dictionary there, glossary, negligent, the word negligent, it's characterized by or inclined to neglect. We talked about neglect in the previous class, especially habitually. You've done it so long to where now it's become a habit. right? It's become a part of how you operate. Characterized by careless, ease, or informality, casual, all right, negligent. So people just kind of have an attitude of, they're children, they'll figure it out. We've got food in the, box of breakfast food in the cabinet, and some spoiled milk, just filter it, right? People get careless. They get ease, and some of the words are used are like lackadaisical in regards to their responsibility as a parent. And we're talking about, in regards to being a parent here. In other words, they do not provide their children with sufficient food or clothing, nor do they give their children attention or love. Homes where these types of abuses and negligence occur are called dysfunctional homes, and that was covered in the previous classes. Now, I just want you to think here, or keep in mind in regards to, this word here, love, as we're talking about the relationship between parents and children, and some of the things we're going to cover here. Just compare it with morality, okay? Love is upholding the rules that don't bring harm to yourself, others, or the environment, okay? Not to be confused with affection. That's a little bit different. But in regards to the love that a parent shows, we just covered some of the things. They provide, the food, the clothing, the shelter, give them a warm place to sleep at night, make sure that they have their needs met. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to have the latest fashion, the latest pair of shoes, right? Sometimes children get in their mindset, you don't love me. If you love me, you'd give me this latest pair of shoes, or you let me have this $1,200 phone or whatever. You don't love me. Now, see, they're confusing, that with the parent, with the rules that govern what love shows towards a parent and the child. Okay, and so just keep that in mind as we move forward, because that word is so vastly used. In fact, it's used to deceive children into engaging in things that classifies as abuse. Okay, the trust is formed and so forth. And again, that goes back to character and personality here. So we're going to look at some of these things here in regards to the dysfunctional homes and somehow how that is classified in regards to physical abuse and verbal abuse and so forth. Let me see here. Physical abuse here, it results in internal or external bruises. Okay, remember we talked about some of the upbringing that children go through, bringing about verbally, emotionally, and physical abuse. It results in internal or external bruises. Can you turn that off? Internal or external bruises, fractures, brain damage, permanent injury, or death. Okay, this is when it gets so severe with the child with these physical abuses that it can actually result in death. And in many years, or throughout the year, you'll occasionally come across the news where a parent was arrested because they shook their baby. Shaken baby syndrome is something it's pretty common, sadly, in society, because new parents don't know how to control their emotions. And a newborn child, they require a great amount of attention. A tremendous amount of attention. You can't just expect the newborn child to just grow up, come out, and then next thing you know, they're sleeping 8 hours a day. Oh, how a mother would love that, Fathers tend to be able to sleep through it. They're sleeping 8 hours a day. They need their diapers changed consistently. They need to be fed on a regular basis. And when they're not fed, they don't raise their hand and say, "Mommy, I need food." No, they cry, because that's all they know to do. And so some people can't handle that for whatever reason, okay? And as a result, they'll sometimes grab the baby and they'll shake the baby. And what that occurs is that the brain shakes around in the head, causing severe concussions and so forth, and swelling of the brain. And the child, in some cases, if it's not caught, they can die as a result. Okay. Again, this goes back to training. This goes back to education. This goes back to teaching the parent how to be a parent to begin with. Teaching them about their character so that they can see the flaws in their character and know the things that they need to work on, giving them the tools that they need to work on so that they can be proper parents and they can parent properly their children. So we see here, those are some of the things that can occur when there is physical abuse within the family. And underneath the little girl there that's crying there, it says emotional and verbal abuse is also something that we see taking place as well. It says, even though physical pain is not inflicted, emotional and verbal abuse are just as damaging. Okay, emotional and verbal abuse are just as damaging. And there's an old saying, you know, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I don't know if that was made up by children or not, but words can be very damaging. You know, and they can stick with you for a very long time, especially when those words are coming from someone that you look up to and you trust, such as a parent or a guardian. It says, years ago, the National Committee for the Prevention of Child Abuse made the public aware of this form of abuse by displaying posters that read, "Words hit as hard as fists." In fact, I got the, let's see here. This is, there we go. Years ago, this was back in 1987, when the National Committee for the Prevention of Child Abuse made these posters that went out. And, and this is where, we got this here from in the Peaceful Solution. But you see there, at the very beginning, it says, children believe what their parents tell them. Remember, our first teachers, our first influences in our lives are our parents. And why would a child doubt their parents? Right? Why would they doubt their parents? They're the example that they have set before them. So they tend to have a certain level of trust automatically set there in their minds for their parents. Okay? Children believe what their parents tell them. And so we have some of the same things here. You disgust me, you're pathetic, you can't do anything right, you can't be my kid. I've heard that sometimes in joking, well, surely they can't be mine, making, with those types of actions. But, in saying this to a child can be very detrimental to them. You can't be my kid. Hey, stupid, don't you know how to listen? I wish you were never born. And then at the bottom it says, words hit as hard as fists. Next time, stop and listen to what you're saying. You might not believe your ears. And it's interesting that they put there, stop and listen to what you're saying, because we teach the same thing in the Peaceful Solution, to stop and think. Before it even comes out of your mouth, stop and think. It's important that we stop and think about the things that we say. There's going to be frustrations in parenting. There's going to be frustrations in dealing with and interacting with on a teacher and student basis, because children have a lot of silliness in their minds. They want to play, they want to jump, they want to act up, they want to be the class clown. But we can't allow those emotions to dictate how we respond to the child. As parents, adults, teachers, we must always be on guard with our thoughts. And sadly, not everybody is taught this in regards to practicing self-control. And it might very well be the case that, as we talked about in the previous classes, that those parents were abused themselves. Those parents were taught that themselves. They were told they were stupid, or that, you'll never amount to anything. I would you were never born. So they've carried that with them all their lives. And even though sometimes they might have said that they don't want to be that way, they find themselves doing the same thing that their parents do, out of frustration. Okay? It says at the bottom there, it says every year, over 18,000 children in the U.S. alone are physically abused, and many more are emotionally and sexually abused. In fact, it was kind of trying to get the right numbers here to find out some of this information in regards to abuse. Of course, this, we know the numbers are much higher than what they used to be, but this is from the National Children's Alliance.org, and it shows here the scope of the problem of child abuse. It says nearly 700,000 children are abused in the U.S. each year. An estimated 678,000 children, unique incidents, were victims of abuse and neglect in 2018, which is the most recent year for the information here. It says that's about 1% of kids in a given year. However, this data might be incomplete, and the actual number of children abused is likely underreported. So that number is much higher than what's actually reported. It says the youngest children were most vulnerable to abuse, which we spoke about before. Children in the first year of their life, had the highest rate of victimization in the first year of their life. And then it says here in 2018 here, an estimated 1,770 children died from abuse and neglect, and this is just in the United States. Okay, just in the United States. And of course, remember what we just read there. You know, these numbers, these statistics are underreported. Okay, and so as a result, I'm sure that number is even higher than what it is. One child dying as a result of neglect is too high. Okay, and it's going to take a while, and it takes education and time and patience and steadfastness, but you know, we could actually begin to turn this around. What you're doing right now is a part of the process that will actually begin to turn society around. And lastly there it says, nationally, neglect is the most common form of abuse. Neglect being the most common form of abuse, which we talked about there, not providing the proper food and clothing and things of that nature for a child, leaving them homes. There was a story that I listened to not that long ago. I believe it was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where a lady that was supposed to be watching her children and some of her nieces, she left them to go to buy some lottery tickets, and while she was gone, the children started a fire in the home because they were going to try to cook something on the stove. Now we're talking, 5, 6, 7-year-old children, and sometimes children, they can, but they should be supervised, in those things. There's nothing wrong with teaching your children certain responsibilities, but as a parent, they need to be supervised because there's a lot of danger in fire and hot oil and cooking and things of that nature. But while she was gone, the children, they set fire to the house, and sadly, all of them died as a result of it. There's many other cases that we've seen. There was a huge spree of it for a long time. It seemed like almost every day or every week there was a report of a parent leaving their child in the car, leaving their child in the hot car, going to work, coming out, going to the bar, coming out, going for an interview, coming out, and their child is left in a hot car. Now, I know in the north, the average temperatures in the summertime might be around, in Ohio, 85, 90 was like a sweltering day, right? But down here in Texas, sometimes the temperatures can crank up around 110 degrees in the summertime. Now imagine a child being in a hot car. Any of us have opened a car door in the summertime and get into it for the first time, and you get that blast furnace of heat that comes out of there. Now imagine a child sitting in there for an hour or something. And many of them die as a result of brain damage and heat stroke. But a lot of times parents are just careless in regards to that. Now, some of these things are accidents, I understand, but sometimes the parents is just being neglectful. They don't want to find a babysitter, or they can't, or don't really care, and the child dies as a result of it. So, these are the different forms of neglect that we see on a yearly basis throughout the United States, and we're just one country, okay? Almost about 336, 340 something million people in the United States. Okay, and this takes place all over the world. Okay, children are abused all over the world every day. Sadly, trafficking is another thing where children are abused. So let's look at page 39 here. It says, "Take a bite." Look at the little apple above the apple there. It says, "Take a bite of this. If you are asked to keep a secret that makes you feel uncomfortable, tell someone as fast as you can. Secrets that involve physical or sexual abuse are never meant to be kept." Okay, and this is something that, a person might They might be hearing for the first time because, an uncle or a sibling or another relative, a cousin or a parent or a guardian. A lot of children are in the foster system. They had the trust and the fear. Sometimes it's fear instilled within them to not say anything. Otherwise, something bad is going to occur to that individual, and I won't be able to take care of you anymore. Some things that might be said, or something bad will occur to you if you tell anybody about what's taking place. Okay? And so it's important for us as teachers to keep in mind that, like the previous teachers, Chris and William said in the previous classes, when we go to schools and we teach this, as the guidance counselors have said, there are children who are experiencing these very things. And even if they didn't tell us that, we would expect that there were children experiencing these very things. In a world where the peaceful solution is not taught, you can expect that any of these immoral acts are taking place anywhere at any time throughout the world. Okay? And you never know who you'll come across. You never know whose path you crossed in your daily interactions, who suffered these types of things, either in their past or currently. So it says here at the bottom, underneath the apple, sexual abuse that occurs in the home is extremely demoralizing and damaging to children. It includes, but is not limited to, inappropriate touching or having someone ask to see you. Of course, when you're dealing with children, they understand about these things, private areas, and encouraging you to look at theirs. This type of abuse can be committed by any member of the family. In fact, the statistics show that 3 out of 4 victims of abuse know the person very well. 75%. It's not a stranger that comes and abuses them. Not necessarily is it always a family member, but 75% of those who are abused, they know the person very well. And so, again, this is something that is sometimes used to bring a level of familiarity and comfort to the person before they're taken advantage of. And I was thinking about this earlier in the day, and and tying that into what was covered previously at the beginning of the chapter. Why is it so easy for people to manipulate a child into doing what they want them to do? Because for a lot of those people, they saw how it worked on them. They experienced it themselves, right? And so the pattern continues to repeat if there's no intervention there. You heard the old statement, history repeats itself every 20 years or so. Well, if there's no intervention to change the course of history through education and giving people the tools and resources they need to make better decisions and to get off that road that everybody else is on and take the road less traveled, then what other choice do they have? If they're not presented with another option, they're going to continue to do what they've seen everybody else do. And remember, not only the person who is the victim, but the person that is victimizing, both of them need education, right? They both need training. It says here, before we move on, let's look back there. It says, when this occurs in the home, it is extremely demoralizing and damaging to children. This word demoralizing here, this should really stood out to us because we're talking about morals, right? We're talking about morals and how they relate to our character. But the word demoralizing means to cause to turn aside from what is, it says, what is good or true or morally right. To cause to turn aside from what is true or morally right. Now, we know the things that are morally right are the principles that teach us how to make right choices. The concepts, the principles that teach us how to interact and have positive, healthy, strong relationships with one another in a way that doesn't bring harm to ourselves or others. It says to corrupt the morals of also. That's also in this definition of demoralize. To corrupt the morals of. When you corrupt something, you take away its purity, so to speak. you change the way that it's supposed to function. You've ever worked on a computer and you went to open up a file and it'll say the files have been corrupted, right? So you can't open it because something's wrong with it. The code, there's some information that's there that's not supposed to be there, so all the other information can't read it properly, or information that's supposed to be there and it's not there any longer. Well, the same thing can occur within a person's mind. It says to weaken the morale of, also to discourage, and it also says here to throw into disorder, So the definition of morale there simply means moral principles, which is what we're learning here with the peaceful solution, developing these moral, or understanding or learning these moral principles so that we can value morality within our own lives. But it says to weaken the morale, the moral principles or the teachings or conduct. That's what morale means. Moral principles, teaching, or conduct. The mental and emotional condition of an individual or group with regard to the function or task at hand. Okay, like when people say, yeah, I think we're going to have a great day. The morale is high. Everybody feels great. We're gonna move along with this to getting our job accomplished today. Let's see here. It also says a sense of common purpose with respect to a group. A sense of common purpose with respect to a group. And let's see here. I was going to read this last one. It says the level of individual psychological well-being based on such factors as a sense of purpose and confidence in the future. Okay, a sense of purpose and confidence. And when people experience these things that we're talking about here, and they suffer this demoralization, they start to have the mindset of, what am I even here for? Right? What's my purpose? What's all this for if I'm just going to be abused, or my parent is telling me that I'm so stupid, or they would that I was never born. Maybe it'd be better if I wasn't born. Right? They don't have a sense of purpose. They don't have a sense of value. They don't have a healthy self-concept. Okay, and this is where the peaceful solution comes in, and the teacher who cares about improving the life of that student and starts to plant that seed and water it through continually teaching them to help them to understand that, yes, they are valuable. They do have value. Yes, they do have a purpose. Yes, there are things that they can accomplish. Because it might seem normal to us, to hear these things on a regular basis. And, we tend to think that when something's not directly in our bubble, so to speak, something that we don't see and experience on an everyday basis, we kind of, does it really exist? If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Well, of course it does. Just because we don't hear it fall in the forest or see it fall in the forest still makes a sound. Just because we don't see these things taking place, right, it doesn't mean that people aren't being abused. It doesn't mean that people aren't being devalued on an everyday basis. So, as teachers, we have to kind of break our bubble, so to speak, of sight in regards to understanding that there are a lot of people in society that are suffering many great things. Okay? And our goal here, our job is to educate them so that they can realize first and foremost the value within themselves, and then start to build upon that to improve their lives so that they can be able to better help other people as well. It's kind of, and we'll learn this a little bit later down the line, but it's something called a ripple effect, right? Like dropping a pebble in the water, and you see those ripples, those concentric ripples ripple outward, and they continue to spread further and further. And this is what we do with one person at a time, even, right? When we plant this seed of positive character, and they take hold, it takes hold in the mind, and then they start to put these things to practice in their lives and their interactions with others, and it starts to spread out, right? People see it and they experience it, or they, why is it that you speak this way? Why is it that you talk about how is it that you're so positive? I notice you don't, fly off the handle and get angry. And they start sharing what they've learned, and it starts spreading, one person at a time. So it says here as we continue on page 39, so it says, if anyone touches you in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, tell them immediately to stop. Then tell someone who will listen. If there is no one in your family who you can go to, which sometimes this is a case in single parent homes, or sometimes the case where both parents are being abusive, then go tell your teacher, guidance counselor, or some other trusted adult, but let somebody know. And this is why we just got finished reading about the statistics there, that the majority of these things, or a percentage of these statistics, are underreported, right? Because children don't say anything. People don't say anything, okay? So it's necessary to say something. And again, the goal is not, to send the person to jail who's abusing. The goal is to get both people help so that they can start to make better choices, so they can rebuild their lives. Somebody who's been abused, they have to actually start a process of kind of rebuilding their life because they've been demoralized. They've been made to feel they have no purpose, they have no benefit, they have no value. Well, now that has to start being rebuilt again. And the person who's been abusing, well, we have to get to the root cause of the problem and start to let them know, hey, yes, that they are valuable as well. And they can show that value for themselves and others by doing A, B, C, D, and so forth. Okay? So it's an education process from both ends that needs to be done. And it's not a matter of pointing the fingers because, anybody can fall into these things. Anybody could be subject to these things at any point in their life. So it says here, under no circumstances should you keep it a secret. No one has the right to touch you or ask you to touch him or her in a sexual way, and sexual abuse violates the bond of trust and respect that must exist between family members, and it tears families apart. That is, when this takes place, it actually tears families apart. I was going to make a point here. Where was it here? No one has a right. Yeah, right here where we think about this here. No one has a right to touch you. Even parents, there are certain rights that parents have regarding their children, right? The child goes out there and they start doing all types of wreaking havoc on the land, in the city and so forth. What are the authorities going to do? They're going to bring them back to their children. Right? If a child is unlawfully taken away from their home, what is that called? Kidnapping, right? Because the person who took the child does not have rights to that child. That parent has the rights to that child, okay? And so there are certain rights that parents have in regards to their children. But remember, again, we have to always go back to the peaceful solution, right? Those rights that they have to their children, and these go into legal rights and so forth, and their interactions with their children, upholding those rights, would never bring harm to the child, okay? Because the child themselves also has rights, and one of those rights is to live in safety, okay? So just because a person's a parent or a guardian, it doesn't give them the right to abuse the child, because it violates that bond of trust. That bond, you think about a bond, it's something used to hold something together, right? It could be glue, it could be a rope. In this instance, what we're covering here, it's character education, right? Having moral values, moral principles that two people can agree with, it can be used to hold people together. And to build a healthy family, a healthy relationship, to hold that relationship of parent and child, or parent and guardian, or siblings, and whatever you have, to hold them together. And that bond, right, again, you'll hear this over and over and over, it will never bring harm. But that bond, it must exist between family members, and of course, when this is not, it tears family apart. Well, if you know someone who is in an abusive situation, encourage him or her to confide in a trusted adult, so that the process can be taken to fix the problem. Now, at the top here of the page on 39, on the right-hand column there, it says, in a home where there is neglect, children are frequently left without food, attention, or love. Often young children are left to care for themselves, to cook, clean, and do their own laundry. In a home such as this, children suffer from malnutrition. Now, this is talking about young children, cooking and cleaning and doing their laundry. We're not talking about a 35-year-old that's still living at home with their parents. All right? Mom shouldn't be doing your laundry, washing your socks. We're talking about young children, 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, Now again, there's nothing wrong with teaching your child responsibility by giving them chores, which we're going to cover here, giving them structure and so forth. But it doesn't mean neglecting them altogether and letting them take care of running the entire household. Because the child, it's not their responsibility. It's the parents' responsibility to take care of the family. And so in doing that, you can't leave your children to basically fend for themselves. Because without the proper education, it's more than likely they're going to get into something or a situation that they're not going to know how to respond. What occurs when they're cooking and there's a grease fire? Well, is there any fire extinguishers in the home? Has a parent taught them how to use a fire extinguisher? And most of the time when people see fires, the fire truck comes out, they hook up to a fire extinguisher, and then what do? They work to put the fire out. Well, a child might think, grab some water out of the sink and douse it on the grease fire. Well, most of us adults will know that what? Grease fire, water and grease don't mix, water and oil doesn't mix. It makes the fire bigger. Now the fire's on the curtains and it's on the cabinets, you know what I mean? So, a certain level of constant education has to be given to the child to enable them to make conscientious choices. And of course, as a parent, and we're not going to really cover that here in this book, that's more in the parenting manual, but the chores and the things that are given to a child has to be age appropriate. Okay, it has to be what they're physically and mentally able to do. You wouldn't give a 3-year-old a job that you'd give a 16-year-old out there pushing a lawnmower. Right? First off, their legs would probably be dangling from the lawnmower handle because they're not tall enough to push the thing. But they could seriously injure themselves, if they backed up and tripped over a rock or something like that. So, as a parent, they have to give age-appropriate responsibilities to the child to help them. If a chore or something is wanting to be given to the child to teach them to responsibility in that thing, then, of course, all those things have to be taken into consideration. It says, in homes such as this, children suffer from malnutrition, which means that they are not getting enough healthy food to support their growing bodies and minds. And children do tend to eat a lot, and that's because there's processes in their bodies that are causing them to grow. I'm sure many of us have seen people, and we'll see them a few months or a year later, and it's like they shot up a whole 6-7 inches. It's like they went through a growth spurt. Well, during that time, the body is consuming a lot of energy that's put into causing that person's body to grow. Well, they've got to replace it with nutrients and so forth. Okay, and so a parent, it's necessary for them to provide those things, healthy and the things that they need. Doesn't mean giving them everything that they need that they want to eat, but giving them and providing them the healthy, nutritious foods and drinks that they need to grow and become have a healthy body and mind. Because food is so necessary, not just for eating, but it's necessary to support healthy mind function. William mentioned some last class about the fish, and sometimes starting to teach this peaceful solution to class is like trying to feed them cod liver oil, right? Well, there's oils in fish and a lot of food, not only fish, right? That are very beneficial to the mind. Helps the mind to function properly, and you get it in a lot of different foods, right? But without those things or a lack of those things, nutrients, not just that, a child's development might be a little bit slowed down. So all those are taken into consideration in raising children. It says these homes usually lack structure, in that there is no set time for daily routines. Routines such as study time, bath time, and bedtime are important in teaching character traits such as dependability and responsibility, okay, which is necessary because if a child does not have a structure to be able to learn, these are just two of the traits that we're talking about here, but how to be a dependable and responsible person, then they're going to go through life just carelessly, working. They can't hold down the job, right? They can't be trusted to be on time to do anything. They can't finish anything. And if they were never taught that at a young age, well, what can you expect? Now, again, it's not impossible for them to start to develop that character trait, but it makes it very difficult when they get older. This word structure here, it is the arrangement of and relations between the parts or elements or something. It also is, when you think about a building or other object, it's constructed from several parts, right? To make that structure strong and able to stand on its own, right? And there has to be structure within a family in order for the child to develop these healthy traits, the responsibility and dependability. In other words, there's got to be a time for this and a time for that and a time for this. And the children, they tend to get used to that, right? They know, well, this time is my bedtime, or, when I see this, I have to take out the trash, or I have to wash the dishes and things of that nature. And now they don't think about that. Like was said last class, we don't think. I remember being a child and I remember wanting to wash the dishes. I don't know why I wanted to wash the dishes, but I did want to wash the dishes. I don't know if it was something new or maybe it's just the bubbles. I wanted to play in the bubbles, but I remember wanting to wash the dishes. And, my mom let me wash them a few times with her and help like rinse them and dry them and so forth. And I was being supervised because glasses can break and they can cut you and things of that nature. And then after a while, for some reason, that thing that I wanted to do all of a sudden become my chore. And I didn't want to do it anymore, But after my mother saw that I was doing a great job and I was, becoming responsible enough to do it by myself, then she gave it to me to do. And it was a baton that I didn't want to be passed, but it was something that was given to me to do. I mean, and even to this day, washing dishes is still not my most honorable thing, but I do like to eat off of clean plates, right? So I'll take the initiative, if necessary, to wash the dish or dishes in order to do so. But all these things help to create a structure in the child's life, and it's very necessary. And they don't realize it. They don't see that. They don't see the benefit as a parent and a teacher. We kind of have that foresight to see that, well, if we start instilling these traits in our child right now, when they're older, then hopefully they'll understand what we're teaching them, and they'll start to carry that on themselves. But it's important that there is structure. It's something, I've mentioned this before, and I pulled it off the line here because it's kind of contrary to structure, and it's a concept called free-range parenting. And what it is, it's a concept of raising children in the spirit of encouraging them to function independently and with limited parental supervision, in accordance of their age of development and with the reasonable acceptance of realistic personal risk. All right, and the first time I saw this was on I don't know if it was a nightly news program, but it was interesting. It caught my attention because I free range. I thought, well, chickens, and then they said parenting, and I'm thinking, oh, the parents just walking around in the field or whatever, or but the children were like running around, screaming, just carrying on like chickens with their heads cut off, right? And there was like really no intervention from the parents. And a lot of the advocates of this to say, well, it's not being totally uninvolved in your child's life, but just letting them make their own decisions. Now, I don't know about you, but 3- and 4-year-olds are not fully capable of having foresight or insight or reasoning what the outcome of a poor choice will bring. And this is why we have parents to begin with. And, it's not necessary for a 3 or 4-year-old to be independent. Now, it's necessary for them to learn how to do some things on their own as they get older, but for the most part, they're going to need the guidance of their parents, right, to guide them. And it says here, because I thought it was interesting, it says, and with a reasonable acceptance of realistic personal risk. So this is something they're telling to the child that, hey, listen, you want to ride your bike? Yeah, you can ride it in the highway, but understand you might get hit and die, right? Now that might be extreme, but just putting the child out there and say, hey, listen, there's some risks to what you're doing, right? But yeah, go ahead and do it. Now, that's not what the peaceful solution is teaching, right? We're teaching that that you do need to understand the difference between positive and negative character, the difference between positive and negative choices, and to understand that, yes, there are risks. You do take your life in your own hands, so to speak, when you make negative choices. There are going to be consequences that come as a result of making poor or negative choices. But one of the things that the peaceful solution also does is accentuate the positive. We drive home the point that it's imperative as an individual that you set your mind to consistently make positive choices. Even though you might not see the benefit in it right now in your life, 7-year-old or 8-year-old or 13-year-old. But trust me, as you consistently do this, you're going to develop, your character is going to develop, it's going to become stronger, right? You're going to actually become a person of integrity. People are going to see you as a leader. They're going to see you as trustworthy and dependable. And you're going to go a lot farther in life than people who don't put forth any effort or who aren't trained to put forth any effort to improve themselves and be a benefit to society. Okay? And so there are a lot of concepts in the world that give people an idea of how they should raise their parents, or not raise their parents, raise their children, how parents should raise their children, right? But they don't have the foundation of giving the parent and the child what's necessary to make the decisions, to build their positive character. Most of these things they don't even focus on character, okay? And character is something that we take with us everywhere we go. And so, these concepts are extremely important. And then, as we kind of got through a little bit of the, some people might say cringy stuff here, but this is a part of life. Hopefully eventually it won't be anymore. But in today's society it is, because, we've gotten away from, or people don't, they haven't been trained or taught in these positive concepts, these moral principles to govern themselves and, of course, raise their family. And as a result of them not being trained how to be a person of integrity in regards to their character, well, when they become parents, they kind of follow that same path later on. So, again, it's not fixed. It's something that can be changed. It can be turned around. It starts with education and diligently sticking with the things that are taught and continuously going back and rehearsing the information that's been taught. And even through the hard times and the difficulties, because it's not a bed of roses, changing your character, kind of like working out, it's hard to push that heavy weight up, but eventually you get strong enough to where it becomes easy. And then you got to deal with the soreness and the pain of your muscles growing, but eventually, you become stronger. And of course, we're not developing our arm muscles, we're developing our brain muscle, right? And so the more we put this into practice, the more we study this, the stronger our minds, our characters will become, and the greater benefit we will be to society. So we're going to stop there. We'll pick up on page 40. Now, I know those of you who've been following along, I don't want to disappoint you, but we're not going to have any classes until 2021. Yeah. It's just 4 days away, man. Don't worry about it. Which is going to be, our next class is going to be 1-3. That's 1-3, Sunday 1-3, 2021. Man, this year's kind of blown by. And we'll pick up on page 40 as we continue in the chapter 2 of the character unit. Thank you very much. Everyone have a safe trip home, and we'll see you next class.